because they'll grind you to the bone. And then they'll spit you out and you'll be jaded. Welcome to the Truly Social podcast, recorded in Truly Social Studio in downtown Toronto, where the term "let's find time to catch up soon" means sometimes in the next 2 years, and where using the city's public transportation is an exercise in patience. Every 2 weeks or so, we deep dive into the topic of all things social. Unless you think we are talking about social media, we are not. We come from the perspective that all things are social, or as we like to say, social is an approach, not a tool. We aim to tackle the subjects that connect people to people, people to brands, brands to brands, and bots to everything. We're on a mission to get social back on track. Tara is away this week, and who the heck am I? I'm Carlos Pacheco, and this is Truly Social. This week, I'm on my own, and I welcome Daniel Francavilla. Is that how to say it?
Yes, that's correct.
Danielle is the founder and a creative director at Now Creative Group, which is a creative agency that helps small and large companies with their branding, their content, and their social strategy. Essentially, he's my competition, right?
Yes. More on the branding and design side for sure.
Yes. Danielle, we met this summer at an agency lunch, and we sort of clicked, and we've had great conversations since. Tell me a little bit about, how you got into the industry.
Yeah, so I actually started off as graphic design. So just in design, 2D design. I went to OCAD University for their graphic design program, and so much of it was just about the principles of art and design, and very little about anything to do with business or marketing. And so I decided to, do a lot of my own research in that and look at these agencies, and didn't even really know what an agency was. But I ended up applying to maybe one agency I wanted to work for, and they weren't even hiring at the time in a design role. And then I realized that I wouldn't want to just be doing one aspect of a project. I really love the strategy, the idea side. So I started freelancing as a designer right out of school, and realized people were asking me for a lot more than just a logo. They wanted business cards. They wanted help with their content. They wanted a website. They wanted social. And I realized I probably can't do this all myself. So I slowly decided to, build a team of people. And that was just still as Daniel. And eventually, after a year and a half or 2 years of that, I created my business, Now Creative Group. And I was doing all of this out of Brampton, actually, which is where I'm from. And what I decided is that, I need this separation, this trigger to move forward and launch this company. And so I rented a desk at a co-working space in Toronto, and that was the start of Now Creative Group.
Awesome. So today we're going to have sort of a back and forth discussions about, having a digital agency, the world of marketing, and sort of the challenges we're faced with clients and within ourselves, right? Sort of keep going and, all the things that sort of a new agency in this reality right now has to face with. Right. We have a bunch of, subjects we're going to tackle, so I'll get straight to it. One of the things that we, have a challenge, we personally as Truly Social are challenged with. It's a very justified challenge. Basically, Tara, says we need to eat our own dog food. So, meaning we're a content marketing agency. We always tout the value of content. So we should be, publishing and creating content on a regular basis. It's not easy. We have this podcast, which is very young. We have Tara's initial YouTube series that's still going. And even that sometimes of a challenge to keep going. It takes a lot of effort to do that. And we also publish blog posts on a regular basis. It's, again, sort of reiterating, it's not easy for us. We definitely take a lot of resources and time to do it. We don't see a lot of other agencies do it, which I think is a sort of a sign that, I feel like it's sort of an edge for us. It's sort of hey, we, we're touting this. We're also, fully behind the value of this. And it's proven effective for us. We do get leads through our content, and we build new relationships. I know that you, Danielle, have sort of like done the sort of same thing with you guys. You're sort of faced with the same challenge of like, it's hard to do.
Yes.
And, what are your sort of like solutions, or are you still in the sort of like battling phase?
Yeah, well, it's definitely an ongoing battle for time and resources, right? So, as a relatively small agency, I have all of these ideas for content and things that we want to create, both, for things that are for the industry and also other side projects that we have that we want to create, right, when it comes to content. So I found that it is a worthwhile investment, I think, in the long run. I think one of the ways I've seen it paid off is when we are hiring. That is actually the thing that comes up pretty often. So in interviews, people will say, "Oh, I watched your vlog and I saw you guys do this," right? Or I've been following you on Instagram for a while and that's why I've decided to apply. So that actually is, some tangible results.
Yep.
I've never been in a corporate pitch where they even know about our Instagram, for example, right? So sometimes they'll ask questions that I'm like, really, if you saw our social media, you would actually know this, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny it's actually really hard to compare if it pays off financially, but I think what's super important is walking the talk, right?
Yeah.
We're telling brands to be active. We're telling people to create their own original content, show their process, show behind the scenes, put in that effort. And if we're not doing it, I think it's a little bit. We're not setting a good example if we don't post at all, right? Yeah. So we're still working out, the frequency and the formats, but I can mention what we've done so far. So when Instagram TV, IGTV came out, we jumped on that. We have a few episodes on there right away. Didn't necessarily perform as well as we would assume.
And admittedly, that to me, like IGTV is a dead on arrival.
It could be, yeah. It could be.
It's not necessarily your fault. Right?
Exactly. So we wanted to, try out that platform
totally
right
makes
away.
Sense.
We also have our vlogs. So we used to do a vlog every 2 weeks, and throughout the summer we kind of shifted it from being an obligatory vlog episode to, hey, we're going to this event, let's do a video about this event, right? And so we're not necessarily doing the official vlog episodes right now, but we do have several of those that we tried consistently. And then on our Instagram, we try to post, at least 3 or 4 times a week. Our Instagram stories are as often as possible, but we really want to highlight our client work and our behind the scenes work on our social, because that's what shows people who we are, right? That's connectable, it's relatable, and from a business standpoint, it shows that we're in business. Let's put it that way, right? Those agencies that haven't posted in weeks, you really wonder what exactly they're up to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for us, we see the advantage in again sharing the content. I was on a call yesterday with a prospect for a new client, and I was like, hey, we do this, but you can take a look at, Tara's videos, and, they really showcase a little bit of how we think. And they're in a conversation, she was like, I love the way, she explained things, and I understand what you guys are doing and all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely proven to be a great lead.
It's a sales tool essentially for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. On the subject of this piece of content, for me, I'm a voracious podcast listener, and I always love the idea of having my own podcast. But unless I want to do a podcast about my love of Transformers, it's not willingness or sort of, I was afraid of starting. And being a Truly Social, it's sort of given me that opportunity to sort of experiment. We try to educate our clients as well as that content doesn't need to come out fully baked, right? You can experiment on these platforms and nobody's going to look at you, weird, and you're not going to get backlash. People are going to give you feedback. We've had clients that launch big media campaigns and then all of a sudden their media buy needs to be completely canceled because the ad doesn't perform. Not that it doesn't perform, but there's a backlash against the ad, right? And it's like, well, you just spent $500,000. Boom. Whereas creating a podcast does not cost you $500,000. We're also using this as a way for us to learn how to create these content at a very low budget for clients. As soon as you talk to any production company, a creative production company, those costs get very high. And we all have the tools to create content now, and it can be done at a very low cost. So again, this is all the reasoning for us to sort of like eat our own dog food and create this content, because it just helps us learn and it helps us teach our clients.
Yeah.
Next thing that we wanted to sort of talk about was a little bit of like the challenge of client transparency, right? Like, how we adapt to clients who don't have a background or information to share with the agency. One of the biggest challenges for us, we often get clients that are like, have little to no history on social media or online when it comes to content. They have a website, but they don't create any content. And it takes a lot of effort for us to sort of like figure out what that voice is going to be and pull some information. One of our solutions for that, and I'll start with our solutions for that, is to basically create an onboarding system that the client does a huge data dump on, what they've done so far, how they want to communicate with us, and what they're looking for, right? We've had issues in the past where clients come to us and with no clear goal, and they just want to be on social media, they want to go out there, and it's proven to be not a good way to sort of approach this platform. What do you guys do to help alleviate that on your end?
Yeah, so I think for us, because we have the background of the design and the branding, we really try to either dissect and probe on their brand and what some of their business goals are, but also sometimes that actually leads to an exercise of us having to do some branding and strategy work before we can even start with social. Now, for smaller companies, it's kind of it's a hard sell sometimes, because you're asking us to. Well, we're asking them to actually pay us more money for a service to help investigate what we are going to do for them in the end, right? But the long-term value of that is so worth it, right? Because we can do research, we can do different types of content, we can do samples, we can do competitive analysis. We can do everything that will really help them be effective, because there's no point hiring someone to run your social media if you're not giving them any direction. And the other challenge is, if there are no goals, sometimes the expectations are actually they don't know what to judge you based off of, right? So they can't really track your performance. So we've had cases where someone hired us for social with no specific targets, but in the end, we found out that they just wanted to increase their sales or their bookings. Yeah. And so it wasn't about brand building. It wasn't about growing a follower base. Even though, again, some people just say, oh, yeah, we want to grow our following, right? Yeah. Well, how does that connect to your revenue, for example? And so as a marketing company or a branding company or a social company, our job is not necessarily to run your business for you, right? Or to set those objectives. We can be effective if we are given those specific objectives. For sure.
Exactly. I mean, transparency and letting everybody understand what the goals are, use the overused industry term KPIs, like the key performance indicators for those not in the know, that, allow us to really measure our effectiveness in our communication is really important to define with clients. We've had very good experiences to very surprising experience to the complete opposite as well, with clients who don't really have a definition of that, right?
Yeah, and even it can come it's specific to their target demographic. Sometimes they say it's everyone, right? Yep. Or that's usually a recipe for disaster.
It's millennials, basically. It's millennials, right?
Yeah, which is such a drastic range of people. What interests, right? And so by probing, it makes a lot of sense. Again, you can settle on the side of just quote unquote brand awareness, but who is your follower, right?
Yep.
Get them to describe who their followers are, and I think the other concern is the type of content that's being produced. So of course, if we're going to be producing high production value video, right? If we're going to do a whole video shoot with a set and talent and all this type of stuff, we need to know exactly how that video is going to be used and what it's going to perform, right? So it's a matter of investing in that content with a purpose, with a specific goal. And for us, we try to provide more value. We're not just going to, spend thousands of dollars and do a 1-minute video for you. We're going to try to come up with a content strategy and do a series of videos or a series of clips. And that's just one example. If the goals are clear, then we can adapt our deliverables.
Yeah, exactly. So on to the next question. How we define ourselves. Clients are often a little confused in terms of like the types of agencies, the different types of agency. Are you a digital agency? Are you a creative agency? A social agency? I think no matter what, everybody ends up wearing multiple hats. I've worked in full service agencies. I think they have their value, but I also don't think they're right for every client. We focus on a specific type of marketing, content and social strategy, because that's what we love, and I think there's a value, and there are clients out there that just need that type of service. How do you see this evolving in the future? Like for me, I feel like the industry is in sort of a rocky situation these days, and everybody's sort of like shuffling around and trying to figure things out. But at the same time, I see a lot of like things I've seen before, right? There's always new agencies. I remember a couple years ago, people were talking about Snapchat agencies, right? And so like, really, and all that sort of stuff. And recently I've had a conversation with a colleague in industry who's like, the new interesting agencies are agencies that are platform specific. Are you a Shopify agency? Are you a YouTube agency, right? And I'm thinking, well, that's cool, but that platform decides to switch things around, or that platform becomes uncool, then you're left with like, oh, what are you now, right? So I'm not sure that's where the industry needs to go. Do you have any sort of like perspective that you want to bring into that conversation?
Yeah, so I definitely think that, you can't be everything to everyone. And sometimes advice that we give to our clients is, again, if your brand is speaking to everyone, it's speaking to no one, right? So from that perspective, I think there's two different ways to differentiate. One is in the services that you offer, and one is in, services and your approach, and one is in the actual industries that you want to niche in, right? So, for example, if you are a full service agency, quote unquote, full service agency, but you only work in the food industry, for example, then, personally, I think that is enough of a differentiating factor that it makes sense because you have those expertise, right? But again, just saying that you are a video production company, that's great. One of the things I've seen with video production companies, though, is that they typically need some type of marketing partner or a strategist or an agency to help pull all those things together, right? Yeah. Unless, of course, the client, has that super down pat. But from the perspective of the quote-unquote value, the perceived value, it does sound great that it's a full service agency. They're going to take care of everything for you. But realistically, in the agency world, any larger companies that I've worked with, they're all working with multiple agencies, multiple providers. They have a marketing consultant. They have a communications strategist. Yep. They have their in-house team, and then they have the agencies, right? So the way it's worked out for Now Creative Group is we've remained pretty neutral on that service offering, and we've been able to, over time, decide to niche into those core services of the branding, the social media management, and the content, right? Yeah. From there, of course, if someone says, hey, do you do e-commerce sites? We can make that decision. Our ideal situation would be is that we come up with the branding, the look and the feel of that, and then someone else will execute that, right? So we're in year 6. And only the last year or so have I really been trying to say no to these projects that are just like, no, we don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. We could. It's like we really could if we had to, but that's not what we're trying to do as an agency, right? Yeah,
one of the things that I found frustrating is hearing other smaller agencies sort of like tackling things that they have no expertise with, right? And it's sort of like, we're running a big search campaign for the client. But it's like, wait a minute, you guys are a design agency. And I'm like, but Google's helping us. And I was like, yeah, Google's not really helping you. They're helping them. There's all these sort of like perspectives that you need to think. I do like that idea of a of an industry-specific marketing agency, right? Like a recent ex-employee of ours that left recently joined a medical and health industry marketing agency. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating because it's sort of like, in a way, there's a little bit of a security in that type of work, but it's also an expertise. And one of the things that I've always, been frustrated, but also like looked at it as an opportunity is, I have things that I love, right? Like I love, I pay attention, I still pay attention to the video game industry and I love that industry and I would love to work in a marketing industry, but I would never want to work in a video game company because I've seen the chaos of those companies, but I have a passion for the industry, so I know a lot of it, right? So if I would work in marketing for a video game industry, I would know what I'm talking about, right?
So you have that industry expertise,
exactly, right?
But not necessarily in the subject matter. You don't know how to build a video game or work in that industry, right?
But I know what's the ecosystem, right? And I think that's valuable for clients, right? And that's where I think like having a specific, the world of having like, vertical agencies that focus on specific industries is very interesting. What do you think of like the certain trend these days of clients bringing in-house talent versus, outsourcing with the typical sort of agency thing?
So we've been impacted a couple clients recently that we were doing their social where they brought someone in-house to handle that for us. For us, meaning taking away the business. However, we do still find that there is a need to outsource certain types of content, right? So it's not sustainable for many businesses or organizations to have an in-house video person, for example, or photographer. So that's always something that they're going to need to potentially outsource. I think the trend is only one that can. So, okay, I think it only works in phases. So if you're hiring someone in-house, that person can only be as good as the marketing director or the strategist, right? So if you're in a startup and you decide to bring on a very junior designer because that's what you can afford, well, that designer can only perform so far. Whereas if the company wants to outsource to the agency, they have a creative director, a whole team of designers, an account manager, and that they're going to come up with the solutions that you need there in their room, and then they're going to present them to you, right? Yeah. So it all depends on the leadership that you can offer in-house, really. And I think that as a person, like personally as an individual, I would have a really hard time committing myself, I think, to one brand for infinite amount of time, which is probably why I run an agency and I'm not working in-house somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've also been impacted from that perspective. We do see it as, there was a time where I was a big fan of like the idea of bringing stuff in-house because there are certain aspects of marketing that can be brought in-house. But at the end of the day, like after going client side and seeing what, how that works, and I realize how busy the client is. And I would say, like, for me, there is a very different, there is sort of like a fallacy of that, right? We've had a startup client hire somebody internally that was in charge of their marketing. And a few months in, they realized that this person was too junior for that job. They didn't know how to talk to us. They didn't know how to answer our questions. And, we were trying to help. We were trying to gather information, and it just didn't come because it was a little bit of a challenge there, right? My perspective is like you get into a company, you become complacent. You become sort of like, focused on that thing only, and you're not paying attention to what's happening outside of it and the new opportunities that come.
Absolutely.
So that sort of like switched around to that perspective of bringing people in-house. I do believe that most companies need to have a CMO in-house to sort of understand what's happening in the industry and sort of like guide the agencies, but to actually have the team in-house, unless you're a really well-funded startup, like the Caspers of this world, right? That start, as digital companies or as only handle things online, marketing is part of the DNA. But there'll come a time where, now, Casper is a good example because now they've gone beyond just digital, right? They're doing billboards, they're doing outdoor and stuff like that. And those are types of media buys that can't always be handled in-house, right? So there's always going to be like sort of a back and forth with that. So I definitely think it's going to be like an adjustment in the next couple of years. Certain companies can handle it, other companies can't. And we just need to sort of like, play. And just as you said, like, there are certain aspects that they won't be able to handle. We have a client that, we started all their content production in-house, but after 2 years, we were able to sort of, they took all the lessons that they brought it all in-house, but they loved working with us, and they're like, okay, well, what's the next step of us working together? Like, what are the next types of campaigns that we can work on? What's the next type of advertising that we can work on? Yes, you're still going to advise us on our content, on our distribution, and all that sort of stuff. So the relationship sort of evolved in that space. So they really sort of like, to me, that was a good sort of evolution of that.
Yeah, and then every case like that's going to be unique. But I think as you did mention, it's super important for them to have a CMO or someone who is all thinking about marketing at all times.
Yes.
Because what happens is when you do outsource or even hire someone, that person needs that direction or no one's going to be effective in their job, right?
Yep.
So for us, we have had that where, again, like a communications person is outsourcing to us, and, they might not have answers to those questions because as a company or as an organization, they haven't invested in marketing as a whole. So it's kind of difficult, but for us as an agency, because we've worked with so many different types of clients of all different sizes and all different industries, we can take that knowledge and help, which is, again, that is another benefit of working with an agency.
So one of the things that I also think about when it comes to internal teams is one of the most valuable things that I feel I had when I went to client side is the experience, right, of being an agency and stuff like that. And one of the things that I wish companies would do when they hire their internal CMOs is hire somebody with agency experience, not hire somebody straight out of school just because they have a marketing diploma. When you're in a CMO inside a company and you're dealing with agencies, you need to understand what their realities are and what their capacities are. And to me, that was invaluable, sort of awareness. We started working with agencies at my previous job, and I would very quickly see the BS, right? I would see the BS of what the agency's doing. Nothing against agencies, but there are certain agencies that will take work even though they shouldn't be taking that work, right? And and it's like, wait, you're a branding agency, and again, back to my example, and now you're doing our search because you got a search guy, and it's like, yeah, you know what, search is very specific and it can be very advanced, and your search guy, nothing against them, but there is a very specific expertise when it comes to that versus branding. So that's sort of my perspective when it comes to that. Staffing. We're obviously always looking for new people to join. And what does somebody going out of school need to know when they want to work at an agency? Should they start at a big agency? Should they start at a small agency? Mm-hmm. I'll give you my anecdote right away. My anecdote is that you should start in a bigger agency. The reason why is because they'll grind you to the bone, and then they'll spit you out and you'll be jaded, and then you'll go to a smaller agency and realize, oh, I can have a life, and work involved into more aspects of it, right? Because when you start at a bigger agency, they put you in a very specific section of the role they need you to fill, and that's all you're going to do for months, years on end, right?
Sometimes on one or two clients.
And one or two clients, exactly, right? And I started in at one of the biggest Canadian agencies, and I was young and not as ambitious as I am right now, and I stayed for years on end on the same client, doing the same thing, learning but not learning as much as I did. And then once I left that big agency and went to a smaller one, I was like, oh, feels better, right? I get to learn a little bit more. And, and then now that I'm in my own agency and I see the opportunities that our staff get, they see all aspects of everything happening. Everybody works together a little bit more, tightly, and, and everybody has a lot more flexibility. And I feel like for me, my perspective is that you appreciate more that sort of that learning opportunity. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree on that experience. I obviously have not worked at a larger agency, but I've worked in-house, in a marketing department or a web role. But I feel like so it's really hard to explain this to someone who has never worked in an agency or in a company at all, right? They're straight out of school. They have these visions of, they see ads somewhere, right? And they think that that's what they're going to be working on. But, I have peers and colleagues and people I've mentored that, they realize that they're literally like behind the scenes of a photo shoot for the ad, and they don't even have an opinion on what it looks like, or they're doing mock-ups, but realistically that's being taken to 5 other levels of people, and it's being, their work is never directly seen sometimes, right? And so I can see how frustrating that is because they're so passionate about it. The benefit of working at a larger agency, though, is that you can learn the structure and you can understand, where you fit in and what are all the rules, right? Like you won't even know some of these job titles exist. In a smaller agency, 100% recommend that to someone who's done, at least a couple internships elsewhere. We've had some students, recent grads, apply recently who say that they are looking for a smaller agency. I don't know, what sent them this direction, but they specifically want a smaller team, and the benefits, as you mentioned already, you're working with a closer-knit group. You have full perspective on what the project is and what the client is. You get to see your actual work be used and have that bigger impact, right? So, if you really are looking to make an impact, I would, of course, recommend a smaller agency for sure.
This comes to the end of my first experience as being the solo podcaster here. How do you think I did?
I think you did great.
Thank you. As usual, with every podcast episode, we ask our guests to tell us about their truly social hero. What is a truly social hero? It is a person, a brand, a company that is doing awesome stuff online and is being truly social, or is just creating an impact out of the ordinary that we really appreciate. Danielle, who is your truly social hero?
So I wanted to choose someone a little bit unique and someone who's timely, because they're visiting Toronto this week. So this guy, his name is Adam J.K., Adam J. Kurtz, but his username on all the platforms is Adam J.K., the letter J.K. So he's actually a really interesting story. So he's originally Canadian, but then he moved to the States, and now he lives in New York. We interviewed him last year when we visited New York, and his approach is he's a creative. He sees himself as a designer, but from the public, he's actually an author. He does illustration. He has training in design and illustration, but his work is basically handwritten quotes. And he has several published books. He has a journal. He has a daily companion. He has pick-me-up books. Basically, the reason that he is a truly social hero is because the way he engages online is he's always 100% authentic, right? So whether that's on Twitter when he's commenting on something that's happened in the world, or whether he's posting his graphics on Instagram, these are handwritten notes that he just puts up, and they're usually extremely honest, very funny, sometimes, self-deprecating, or just things that people can relate to, right, of everyday life. And he says things that people really agree with, but they wouldn't necessarily post on their social media. So that's kind of why I love it. And of course, as a designer, I love the visual style that he uses as well.
So where do you think people should follow him?
Definitely start off by checking out his Instagram, which is at AdamJK. And then from there, you'll find he actually has several different Instagram accounts for the different books and publications he's worked on. So you can see all that in his profile.
Awesome. Thanks. So this week, my truly social hero is now with the fall coming, and, I'm seeing the ramp up of video game advertising coming in. All the big titles are starting to come out. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Twitter handle. The reason why is we recently had experiences with a client in the industry where we were advising the client to be friendly with the industry and congratulate other publishers that are sort of creating content and stuff like that. And then, we felt strongly about that, but we got pushed against it, right? Don't promote somebody else's product, blah, 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 right? And then I see, over the last week, there was a new game from another studio called Eidos that, was a new Tomb Raider game. And then I saw Assassin's Creed, like totally gush over the game and like sort of say like, oh my God, congratulations, awesome work, blah, blah, blah. And there's this real community in the industry, right? There is a reason why, there's such a tight-knit group when it comes to gaming, and, to enforce sort of like a rigid branding sort of like rules to that community, to me, goes against it, right? So everybody understands in the industry that like, it survives because of the community. So the fact that Ubisoft lets the community manager like go as far as like congratulate and essentially promote somebody else's video game that is essentially your competition is heartening. So that, to me, that was a great sort of example. I see it from other studios as well. So it's good to see, and I wish more people outside of just the video game industry would sort of understand how it just helps everybody. So Daniel, thank you for coming to the first solo Carlos podcast. I hope you had a good time, and if you're still listening to this, please give us a review, share it with your peers, and thanks for joining. Until next time, this is the Truly Social Podcast, produced by Carlos this week, and will be edited by Inner Light Music in Montreal. Thank you very much.